Today I want to show you guys some tips and tricks for taking good photographs using the camera that you have on your phone. It doesn't really matter what kind of phone you have. Any phone camera should work fine for this. So I've come up with a list of 8 things that you can try using the camera on your phone. These concepts are the rule of thirds, symmetrical and asymmetrical balance, use of leading lines, framing, capturing light and shadow, looking for a pattern and repetition, using a photo to tell a story, and in a separate video I'm going to cover how you can get experimental with your photography. A lot of my examples came during a bike ride that I took around my neighborhood, which you might recognize some of these places. I had a lot of fun cruising around just trying to find things to take pictures of. Trying to find some interesting angles. You can explore a lot of these concepts in your house. You don't really have to go outside for this. So the first concept I want to cover is called the rule of thirds. Most photographers consider this technique to be a simple way to bring dynamic energy and interest to a photo, rather than simply placing the subject in the center of the picture plane. This rule is used so often that most phones offer the option to place a rule of thirds grid over your photo frame. Since I'm using an iPhone, I can walk you through the process here. For Android users, I put a link in the description for a quick walkthrough of how to do this. If you're using an iPhone, you'll go into Settings, scroll down to Camera, tap the switch button here next to Grid, and now you should be able to see the rule of thirds grid in your photo frame. Once you have the grid on your photo frame, there are a couple of basic ways to use it. When taking any kind of outdoor photography, try to use one of the 2 horizontal grid lines to place the horizon line in your photo. This can also be done with the tops of trees or waterline, etc. These vertical grid lines can be used to place any prominent vertical features like a tree trunk, light post, or street sign. In this example, I used the grid to line up the vertical post on the left and the overpass on the top horizontal line. Another way to think of the rule of thirds is to consider these 4 intersections as the perfect areas to place any important subjects or focal points in your photo frame. I did this a couple of times during my photo shoot. Once at the park when I looked up to find interesting line work in an awning, and once again at home on this placemat. The next idea we're going to look at is balance, which can be created both symmetrically and asymmetrically. Here I found a group of cypress trees that presented a good opportunity for this. To arrange the trees symmetrically, I just had to change my viewing angle. I didn't like how this one guy on the far right was getting so friendly with his neighbor, so I cropped these tree lovers out completely. I found another example of symmetrical balance on the basketball court here. Asymmetrical balance is a little bit harder to define because it can be achieved in a lot of ways. One way is when 2 subjects with different sizes and shapes carry equal visual weight, like this bike being used to balance the closed window on the left. Another method is to use something with greater visual weight to balance multiple items with less visual weight. In this case, the red mug has more visual weight because it stands out against the cool background color more than the 3 mugs on the left. Another way to think about this is to balance one large object with several smaller objects. I tried this when taking this photo, attempting to balance the larger tree in the foreground with several smaller trees in the background. I found another opportunity here, attempting to balance this simple looking church in the foreground with the larger, more intricate house in the far background. Once I got my finger cropped out, I have a decent photo. Next, we can think of using leading lines to direct the viewer's attention around the photo. Here I found the perfect place to set my bike, and I liked how the edges of the path, the rails, and the fence kind of pointed toward the bike in the middle. Here I found an interesting sign I wanted to photograph. When I kneeled down to take the picture, the diagonals in the background created leading lines toward my focal point. Another way to emphasize a specific focal point is with what's called framing. This is basically where you use some structure in the environment to create a frame around your subject. During my bike photo shoot, I found that the covered picnic area behind me created a nice frame for the subject. I found another perfect frame for my bike in this tunnel. Another cool thing to look for in your photo shoot are examples of pattern and repetition. Examples of this can be found both in nature and in man-made settings. Here are a few examples of repetition I found at the grocery store. Brief disclaimer, don't go to the grocery store if you don't need to. There's also plenty of examples of repetition to be found in nature. Another idea that photographers are very aware of is how light and shadow play upon the environment. I found several examples of light and shadow revealing repetition at a community pool. I really like the rhythm of shadows that are being cast on this fence. I liked it even better when I switched it to black and white. Here I liked how light and shadow drew attention to the texture of this tree. I found several examples inside my house as well. This shadow on the floor was being cast by a wooden statue we have sitting in our window. I put it down on the floor to create a more interesting composition. And I tried changing the camera orientation. The next thing you can experiment with is taking photos that tell a story. You could argue that every photo tells a story, but I think some have more narrative potential than others. During my photo shoot, I found a few examples of this, but I've seen a lot more examples recently online. Keep in mind that every photo you take won't be great. I had several ideas that I thought were good that turned out pretty bad. There were also a few missed opportunities. The important thing is to keep trying things out, change your viewing angle every now and then, and find out what photos you like to take. Okay, that's all for now. Anxious to see what you guys come up with. And be sure to check out the next video where I'm going to go over experimental photography. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.